Nostalgia. Dave here on our podcast. What's going on in pop culture right now? Catching up after Thanksgiving. Of course, I already talked about all the big stuff with Gladiator and Wicked, but we had to get into Moana 2, the biggest of them all. I also was lucky enough to see A Complete Unknown, the Timothée Chalamet Bob Dylan biopic film, early by several weeks. That doesn't come out until Christmas, so I'm going to get into that. Very exciting. The latest Star Wars Disney Plus series Skeleton Crew premiered. Gotta get into that. A bit under the radar, but Netflix released the Ayrton Senna miniseries about the champion F1 driver that I was very interested in. Have a lot to say on that. And lastly, a bit unexpectedly and unfortunately, we have to talk about all the controversy going on regarding NewJeans and their label and why it's not good by any means and for everyone involved. So, unfortunately, I gotta get into that. So make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See links below. Get the best of 2024 Spotify playlist linked below. Let me know it's good, and let's get into it. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here to discuss all the controversy and recent news regarding NewJeans, of course, the massive K-pop group that has really been taking over the K-pop scene the last 2 years, and their war of words and its consistent escalation between the group and their label Adore and Adore's, parent company, the mega label HYBE, one of the biggest labels in the K-pop industry. There's a lot that's happened. There's a long timeline. Just reading an explainer if you have no idea what's going on. But recently, a lot has come to a head with this, and I'm going to get into really why this is really bad news for everyone involved, but also bad for the fans. There's not a lot of good outcomes with what's happened and where we're going. So just to kind of catch up, more recently things have kind of progressed because NewJeans, they're the creative director, the kind of creative visionary behind this group, which debuted 2.5 years ago or so, and the big force behind a lot of their success is K-pop veteran Minhee Jin. She was effectively demoted and then ended up leaving Adore entirely. And just last week, NewJeans as a group, they announced that they were terminating their contract with Adore and HYBE. And Minhee Jin had been offered previous positions before to stay involved, but not be in control, no longer be the CEO. Again, read the explainer. There's a lot of detail here. But the big flashpoint was last week when NewJeans said they were leaving, and following Minhee Jin in a sense, you would think. And then just even more recently, Adore announced that they will be suing to guarantee the contract's validity. And of course, this is where the problem is, because it makes complete sense that HYBE, this massively successful K-pop label, the home of BTS and LE SSERAFIM and 17 and Tomorrow Together and HYBE, and the list goes on. They are crushing it on all fronts, right? It makes a lot of sense that they would want to hold on to, by my estimation, the most successful and the most interesting and the best, fourth gen K-pop group. They're certainly the most interesting girl group to debut in the last 2 years, and trust me, there's been a lot of groups in the mix here, right? And it makes a lot of sense that they're not just going to let NewJeans go, given all their success in the United States. Think about how big their Lollapalooza performance was last summer, right? Breaking through with songs like Super Shy. Even in a down year for the group with smaller songs like How Sweet, they still find a lot of success. It makes sense they're not going to let the group go. And we don't know a lot as the public, right? NewJeans say they're terminating the contract, and the reason for this all being is that they feel that they've been mistreated by the label. And again, this is not new with this context. They feel like they've been treated badly and deprioritized by the group. Minhee Jin had accused other labels under HYBE of plagiarizing NewJeans, notably Islet. And now at this point, it's kind of I think it's going to be a court battle, right? Because NewJeans say they have the right to terminate their contract. Of course, HYBE and Adore are like, no, this is an exclusive contract. You're still on the hook, which is very common for the music industry, right? You don't just get out of your label deal when it's no longer suiting you necessarily. So we have to see what's going to happen. Unfortunately, what that means is this is going to be tied up in the courts. Now, I can't speak to how quickly this is going to get resolved in the Korean court system. You would think this would take a long time if it was happening in the United States, right? Either way, what does that mean? I mean, our NewJeans aren't going to release new music and promote new music when all this is unsettled. That goes without saying, right? And as the fans have already started to feel this, because NewJeans was supposed to release music in like Q4 of this year. HYBE and Ador had said as much, and they were supposed to go on a world tour next year. All that's completely gone right now. And will NewJeans continue to exist moving forward if they are able to leave successfully? If they really did have, the right to end their contract, we'll find out. I think they would actually be relatively okay. You think they would hook back up with Minhee Jin at a new label? They probably have to change the name, I'd have to imagine, because they don't own the right to the name, you would think. But they're established enough and popular enough that they'd be able to handle that, right? Think of like when GOT7 switched labels, or when groups, live out their end of their contracts and they move on. Like it's possible, especially when you're successful already. So that's of less concern to me, but I just have no context, no way of knowing if that's actually going to be able to happen, right? So what I think will happen, again, with having no real knowledge or insight into it, what I think will happen is that they probably won't be able to break this contract, and they'll have to see it out for probably another 5 years. They're traditionally 7-year deals, from what we understand. Usually, all these women are very young. They still have a long career ahead of them post that deal, but it just doesn't feel like this is going to be the most fruitful enterprise for this group moving forward. And certainly, they will not be creatively happy, personally happy from everything we understand, because they've really appreciated working with Minhee Jin. And I mean, all they've claimed a lot of like bullying and mistreatment by the label, and even if that got cleaned up, you just feel like there's a bridge has been burned, to say the least, right? And now it's technically probably on both sides, right? I don't know how much HYBE are invested into NewJeans anymore beyond just trying to cash some more checks. And my conclusion with all of this is that this is just a colossal bag fumble by HYBE. It just doesn't make a lot of sense because of all the momentum this group had, and how fresh they were, and how big they were getting across the world, right? And you chose to, allegedly be more invested in a group like Islet, which has so much less going for it creatively, and think about like what happened with La Seraphim and their controversies from the quality of their live performance, right? Like it's strange that NewJeans caught all the flack of all your new groups because they were the best of them. And it just doesn't make any sense why they would let this happen, why they wouldn't fix these issues once the group started to, surface them. And it speaks to general controversies about, working conditions and stuff in the industry, particularly the K-pop industry, which has a lot of negative and thorny things that people don't often think about, but we understand are still very much a part of how the machine, cranks the gears. So it's an unfortunate situation, and as a fan, like you think about how much music NewJeans has made. It's not a ton, right? They have what, 20 songs to their name, give or take. A lot of those are short EPs, a few loose singles. Single albums, aka like 2 songs at once. Like they just scratch the surface of what they can achieve critically and creatively, and now it's just completely paused. And the tracks for the train have been removed from the ground, and the train is just completely stationary right now. We have no idea what's going to happen. What I find fascinating about this too is if you think about how HYBE operates, right? They have all their sub labels, right? Like Big Hit Music, home of BTS, and B-Lift Lab, home of Eyeless, right? And of course, Ador, home of NewJeans. The thing is, Ador is only home to NewJeans. There is no other group on that label. And it's different than how big label conglomerates work in the United States right now, like Universal Music Group, by all accounts, of course, the biggest label over here of the big three. UMG is kind of folding all of the sub labels under it into the UMG structure, and it seems to be kind of not siloed anymore. But it still seems like HYBE is operating in a siloed environment, And I wonder if that has a lot to do with the tribalism that clearly was on display at this group in terms of the internal politics and the favoritism. I don't know. But yeah, unfortunately, this is not a good situation, obviously, right? And I just hope we can get some kind of resolution, whether it's positive or negative. We can just get it past the limbo stage, hopefully soon. You know, again, we'll probably see more headlines and more reports. Korea Herald's had a lot of stuff on this, so we'll find out. But yeah, it's just a huge bummer, and honestly, something completely unforeseen when you think back on the kind of whirlwindly successful 2 years NewJeans has had, right? Like think about last year with the success of Super Shy and OMG and ETA, right? ETA is one of really long legs going viral this year too. Like think about that and contrast that to where we're at now. It's like how did this happen? And the blame is solely laid at the label in the industry. But let me know how you're feeling about this situation. What do you think will happen? I think most people want the same thing, but what do you think will happen? Let me know. And, if we get a firm resolution on this, I will talk about it again. And of course, for more K pop music reviews, the more fun things to discuss, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Senna, the new 6-episode miniseries from Netflix about the life of Ayrton Senna. Of course, Senna, the famed, mystique-filled Formula One driver who, of course, tragically passed away in the early 90s, after winning 3 Formula One World Championships. To this day, one of the most revered drivers in all of motorsport, commonly cited with a lot of reverence by the great drivers of today across many sports. And as a big fan of Formula One, I of course was interested in what this miniseries would be like. However, I was coming into this series with a lot of reservation because the 2010 Senna documentary titled Senna is one of the greatest sports documentaries of all time. That is a absolutely fascinating and fantastic piece of work that really gets into why Senna carries so much mystique to this day. And it's really expertly crafted doc because it does not have any talking heads sitting down for the camera. It's told exclusively via archival footage and words from the time. And it's a spectacular piece of work. And Netflix actually, a few weeks ago in the lead up to Senna, the series coming out, got the rights to the Senna doc, which I think was pretty smart. It's a doc that has not been on streaming all that much. It's been rentable sometimes, not even all the time. So it's been a bit hard to see, but it's now thankfully not the case. So I would absolutely endorse that documentary if you have not seen it. The issue with the Senna Netflix miniseries is that this is a very surface level storytelling approach to the career and achievements of Ayrton Senna. If you're a novice to the Senna story, this might be broadly entertaining to you. I think in general, the production design shines pretty well when it comes to showcasing the racing scenes. There's a strong attention to period detail as well in terms of capturing the tracks and the costumes and everything regarding Formula One of the 80s and 90s. However, the problem with the series is that it's so surface level and has really no depth at all to it. So if you are a big fan of Formula One, you're going to find yourself going to Wikipedia all the time to fill in some gaps and refresh your memory because the show is not doing that. Every supporting character in this show is just an archetype, just a one-note character. There's just not a lot to it. Obviously, there's enough drama and thrill to the Senna story that it's still fun to watch it be dramatized. You just can't really expect anything more from this series. Gabriel Leone plays Ayrton Senna. I think he does a pretty good job. Definitely has the look, definitely has the charm, for sure. Leone actually played a different driver, Portago, in the Michael Mann Ferrari movie from last year, so he had a little experience for that. I think that the biggest issue with this series to me, I think, is, again, the lack of depth is exemplified by the fact that this show has, like, dog shit writing. Like, the scripts are bad, like, no doubt. It's just so expository all the time. And when you're going to be so expository and then not go in depth at all, it's just so much telling and not showing, Like, I mean, there are some groaner lines, but I mean, one of the funniest ones to me was in the last episode 6. Ratzenberger, who of course tragically passes away the same weekend that Senna does, the San Marino Grand Prix. Ratzenberger literally has a line saying, quote, "I pay to drive and it's not cheap." Basically, a line in the script to tell you that Ratzenberger was a pay driver. I mean, there's just so many groaners like that throughout this. And again, for me, someone who has seen the Senna doc, although I haven't seen it recently, and of course was not alive, not a Formula One fan during the majority of Senna's career. I was just a baby when he died. Coming to the story after the fact, when I watch this show and it like fills me in, especially his early days, like his career, his rise through like Formula Ford and Formula 2000 and the lead up to making it to F1, right? I find myself going Wikipedia and like, oh, how did that happen? How do we transition? How did he get to McLaren? How did he leave the first team he's on? Right, like the show doesn't barely tells you anything. It just kind of skips ahead as we get to little highlights of every chapter of the Senna life, and it's just little highlights. We don't really get any of the richness that you'd expect from a fully fledged chapter. Now, is it cool to watch like Senna, a dramatized Senna character, talk to like a Nicky Lauda or a James Hunt or a Martin Brundle? Yeah, it's cool, especially if you know who these people are. Right? Like, it's cool to see that. It's almost fan servicey in a sense. And I think the Prost rivalry is done a decent job in the show, but again, it's only surface level. I think Ron Dennis as a character is not colored in nearly as much as he should have been. He's honestly portrayed as kind of a saint on this show, which is not telling the full picture in terms of the other aspects of his career that would follow. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're an F1 fan, I assume you'll be disappointed by this just because it doesn't have a whole lot to offer to you. It's and again, if you're a casual, it'll probably be okay. But like again, nothing too illuminating. Of course, next year we know we're gonna get the F1 movie starring Brad Pitt and Damson Idris from Joseph Kosinski, director of Top Gun Maverick, Lewis Hamilton, a producer on that movie, releasing in the height of summer on IMAX screens. I will be there day one. I'm incredibly excited for that. And we know that's going to look the part and be incredibly thrilling. I'm excited for that movie, absolutely. And, I think I'm happy to get anything racing. Like, I can always find something to at least enjoy about even things that aren't that good, like this, or like Gran Turismo last year, But when you get a Ford versus Ferrari, when we get across our fingers F1 next year, a rush from Ron Howard, those are the gems. And hopefully we get more motorsport stuff from time to time. It's not the most popular genre to portray, and especially not the cheapest either. But yeah, I think the Senna story, it's there was a lot more you could have done here with a longer series, with a better written one. In theory, you could make a show like this about many drivers, right? A lot of drivers that have documentaries about them, right? Like a Michael Schumacher. We'll see. I'm sure we'll get more of this in the future. But yeah, let me know what you think of Senna. Are you in agreement with me that it's pretty lacking if you're a fan of motorsport? Either way, let me know. Of course, make sure you come back the beginning of next year around February. I'll be reacting to the latest season of Netflix's Formula One Drive to Survive, and of course the F1 movie next year, obviously. Yeah, let me know what you thought, and for more movie reviews, TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, Womack Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Skeleton Crew, the latest Star Wars series, premiered the first 2 episodes on Disney Plus, 8 episodes in total for this season. Skeleton Crew is from John Watts, one of his first big projects following his work on the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. Of course, we got his other big project, Wolves, on Apple just a few months ago. And Skeleton Crew stars Jude Law and a bunch of child performers, because this was pitched originally as a Amblin-esque coming-of-age story in the Star Wars universe. And I think in a stronger time for Star Wars storytelling, that's actually a pretty awesome pitch. We always think about the Star Wars sandbox in terms of it's such a rich and vast universe that just so naturally compels that you can tell all kinds of stories within it. And something like this actually feels kind of right at home on the small screen. We wouldn't necessarily want movie resources dedicated to this type of story, I think. We kind of want the more epic scale on the movies. I think that goes without saying. but this perhaps makes some sense on the small screen. Unfortunately, Skeleton Crew is existing in a different era than when it was greenlit. Star Wars and Disney Plus in general is just kind of in a fraught place when it comes to what we have. You know, you think of Star Wars on Disney Plus, and we know there's an Ahsoka season 2 being written by Dave Filoni. He confirmed he's still writing it at the premiere of Skeleton Crew. Therefore, there's actually nothing in production on the live action front after Skeleton Crew. And of course, this is coming on the heels of The Acolyte getting canceled after one season earlier this year, Mandalorian season 4 being switched into a movie, which we know is releasing in May of 2026. They actually just wrapped that filming last week. So as a result, Skeleton Crew is the last live action Star Wars series we're going to get in a while. And frankly, this series finished shooting at the beginning of last year. It's just kind of been on the shelf, right? So after Andor comes out in a few months, which we already know is its final season, there's going to be nothing for some time. And you just think that if Star Wars was in a better place, there'd be a lot more enthusiasm for Skeleton Crew. I'm just not really sensing a lot of that right now. If you evaluate Skeleton Crew just on its merits and you take away the fact that it's not coming in the best time for Star Wars storytelling, it's not the number one type of show that Star Wars fans are asking for right now. If we leave that to the side, I actually think it is pretty charming as like Amblin Spielberg-esque space Goonies with Jude Law. I think that's a decent pitch. Coming of age, Lone Wolf and Cub, these are like really familiar storytelling beats, even in Star Wars for sure. What remains to be seen with Skeleton Crew is the success of these child performers, because I think spending time with young actors is always very hit or miss. I'll actually be curious if Skeleton Crew ends up becoming popular with younger viewers. Obviously, Star Wars fans span generations, and maybe this will not be something that's necessarily appealing to older fans, but might have something to offer for younger fans or a way into Star Wars. Who can say? I think there is some merit to that. I thought visually the show was pretty strong thus far, whether it was the suburbs in the beginning or the cool spaceport on the asteroid in the second episode. Visually, it's there. The story certainly remains to be seen. Will this mystery amount to enough of a propulsive plot? We'll find out. We've only just met Jude Law's character, so there's really not a whole lot to go on with him, although we do know he is a Force user. Of course, the identity of Jude Law's character, is he a former Jedi? What part of the timeline are we actually in? Because all these kids are from a planet that no one on the spaceport knows where it exists, and it's like some legendary thing. I'm curious how that's all going to be resolved, because ostensibly Skeleton Crew is taking place in the New Republic era, post Return of the Jedi, aka the Mandalorian stretch of time. And, in a different time, a different universe of our own, where Star Wars was humming and had more of a connected storytelling approach, you would maybe expect to see Skeleton Crew link up with Mandalorian in some kind of capacity, and that would be really exciting. That's not the world we live in, so I don't have a lot of faith in that happening. But I'm just kind of curious about what's going on more than anything else. And yeah, I mean, I think like there's not a lot of hype to the show. I think it's probably almost certainly a show with a low ceiling, but as a result, it's probably not going to be taking any massive swings the way The Acolyte did, which I gave The Acolyte a lot of credit for its swings, even if a lot of them didn't necessarily land effectively. Again, that kind of speaks to the Star Wars storytelling approach right now. We're throwing lots of paint at the wall, and we're throwing different colors of paint, and we're throwing them at different walls. And that doesn't often feel like congruous storytelling in terms of a brand, but there can be things to latch on to and enjoy in the moment, for what they are. I think a lot of people are looking ahead to Andor Season 2, because that is a show exclusively for adults, in a way Skeleton Crew is not. So, yeah, I think the kids are okay thus far. Not a whole lot really to them yet. We'll see if we get invested in their journey. Not that young performers, young characters haven't become popular in Star Wars. Of course they have. Think of Omega on the Bad Batch quite recently. Of course, that's an animated character. We'll see. But yeah, I think more than anything, it's just I just find the timing of the show a bit unfortunate because I have a feeling a lot of people are not going to give the show a fair shake, and maybe the show will be just mediocre when it's all said and done. I don't know, but I do find its kind of quirky, off to the side nature at least a little bit interesting because it's at least slightly something different than what we've gotten recently. So we'll see how that holds up. That might only get us so far. We'll find out. And yeah, as I said at the beginning, like the place where Star Wars is right now is just fascinating to me. Before we know it, Andor will be out and be done. And let's say Skeleton Crew doesn't get greenlit. There'll be no live action shows in the pipeline except for Ahsoka season 2, which is going to be coming maybe at the end of 26. Mid 26, not coming next year. Hasn't even started filming. So we have the Mandalorian movie in 2.5 years, and that's still it. Star Wars is still struggling to get its momentum and its feet going, and I don't know. It's just a bit disappointing that we're still in this place, but we'll see what happens. I again, like I said, this feels like a show of a different time because you think about the Marvel shows have also dried up on Disney Plus. There's not a lot of them left to release. There's really none of them in production right now. So the strategy continues to shift, and I think getting Star Wars back on track on the big screen is number one priority. I think everyone's kind of in agreement on that, and I think, wishful thinking perhaps, but we'll probably hear a good amount of news at Celebration in 6 months' time. Hopefully some updates on the previously announced movies. I think a lot of people don't exactly put a lot of stock in movies that get announced and people get attached to. Recently we had the was it Simon Kinberg movie or movies in the trades just a few weeks ago. Apart from the Mandalorian and Grogu, which is actually real and tangible, we have nothing to latch on to yet until proven otherwise. So Skeleton Crew and Andor will be the best, the last of it, I think, at least in live action front. They'll be for some time. Animation, I would expect to hear from next year in some fashion. Is that a Star Wars Visions 3? Is it the announcement of the follow-up to the Bad Batch? Who knows? But yeah, let me know. What do you think about Skeleton Crew? What do you think about Star Wars in general? There's a lot to ponder on, a lot of meta aspects of the release of the show, what's going on, etc., etc. Let me know what you're thinking. And for more movie reviews, TV reviews, Star Wars reviews, subscribe. I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Moana 2, the latest animated film from Disney. Moana 2, of course, the sequel to the 2016 sleeper hit. I think people forget that Moana, the original, was not a massive film at the box office at all, but had this incredibly long and successful life, in part buoyed by Disney Plus, and is now one of the biggest and most popular Disney films of all time in a certain sense, because this film is, absolutely like locked in with the younger generation, with Gen Z, Gen Alpha. Like, people love the first Moana in part because I think the songs from Lin-Manuel Miranda are really strong and really stick with people, and it's just been a huge, behemoth of a film. And Moana 2, of course, did in fact, buoy that hype and makes really a lot of sense. But just to kind of put a note on how big Moana 2 has been thus far, it ended up grossing $225 million over 5 days. Of course, the extended opening over the Thanksgiving holiday, breaking the Thanksgiving opening day record, doubling that over from Frozen 2's mark, setting the record for the biggest Disney animation opening of all time, the biggest overall animated opening of all time, beating Mario from last year. This film, without a doubt, will be one of the biggest movies of the year. Frankly, it might have a chance to pass Inside Out 2, which was also at an absolute behemoth that in turn passed Frozen 2 as the highest grossing anime movie of all time. And yeah, I think to me the most interesting about Moana 2 is its journey to the big screen, because this was originally conceived as a TV series for Disney Plus and was smartly, wisely course corrected back to the big screen, because I think, as we all know, the industry has long since accepted the all in for streaming strategy at the expense of theaters is just leaving money on the table, as evidenced by the success of Moana 2. Frankly, you'd have to wonder how successful Hocus Pocus 2 could have been, a movie that was dumped on Disney Plus during the pandemic. But unsurprisingly, Moana 2 is absolutely massive, and that's despite the fact that I don't think Moana 2 is very good at all. Moana 2 really struggles with having any momentum throughout its course. I think the conflict with this film is so thin. The similarities to the first film don't even bother me per se. Moana has another quest to achieve, going out for another adventure with the help of Dwayne Johnson's demigod Maui. That's fine. I think the issue with Moana 2 is just that like the story doesn't make a lot of sense. None of the supporting characters are that compelling. I think Maui, as voiced by Dwayne Johnson, frankly one of his strongest contributions to Hollywood. The Maui character feels very attached after the fact to this story, probably speaking to the Frankenstein nature of this screenplay out of its TV origins. But also, the songs just aren't there this time around. And that's a big problem with, Disney animated musicals. You want the songs to be good, they have to be memorable. That's what keeps people coming back, and that's what helps these movies stand the test of time. And Lin-Manuel Miranda was not involved, and frankly, it shows. Whether you're a fan of Lin or not, obviously he's a bit more polarizing now than he was, say, 10 years ago. His work for the first Moana is some of his greatest contributions to culture, frankly. And his absence is certainly felt. I don't think the songs are very good at all. I certainly don't remember any of them, having just seen the movie. There's some decent humorous moments in the movie. I think the stuff with the coconuts is pretty funny, but all the other supporting characters really don't do a whole lot for me. It just feels incredibly thin, and there's just not a lot of like tension to what's going on basically the entire time. I think the ending is pretty solid, but again, nothing really spectacular about it. The like overarching villain of Nalo, it's just expressed as this like big storm. It just doesn't really have any like bearing, and like you don't feel anything with it. The movie also has, to me, like almost like the Frozen 2 problem, in the sense that like there's such a lack of an antagonist that you just kind of feel it throughout the movie, just because Nalo's, I know he's the storm god, but like the expression of him as just like evil storms that are preventing them from achieving their quest, like it just doesn't have a lot of oomph. And then the Matangi character, when you meet her in the middle of the movie, and she has like some mystery, she has some charm to her, right? I'm like, oh, is this like the villain introduction? I was feeling like almost like Lion King Scar vibes for just a second there, but no, the character's not even really presented as much of a piece of conflict at all, despite her initial quarrel or lack of helping to Maui in the beginning of the movie. And it just feels kind of like a wasted opportunity, almost like an interstitial aspect of the storytelling. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not like super Moana pilled in the first place, so I'm sure like people that like the first one might have more to appreciate about this, but also like it's obviously for kids. I think kids will love it all the same, but like I just think like there's just not a whole lot to really celebrate about this film, especially compared to some recent, Disney hits such as like Encanto or Ride the Last Dragon. Like those movies are a lot better than this. Like it is what it is. That being said, I'm very happy the movie is going to be very successful. I think the kind of late season surge we're seeing at the box office with Wicked and Moana 2 is helping kind of close the gap down for the box office from last year in terms of the strike delays kind of keeping the box office down a bit here. So that's a welcome at the very least. But yeah, let me know what you think of Moana 2. Did you like it more than me? If so, let me know why. I'd love to know, because I just didn't think there was a lot here. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of A Complete Unknown, the music biopic film directed and co-written by James Mangold, starring Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan. I was lucky enough to see this movie a few weeks early before its Christmas release, and of course this film was anticipated for several reasons. Chalamet starring, Bob Dylan as the subject, James Mangold returning to the music biopic fold after making Walk the Line about Johnny Cash with Joaquin Phoenix almost 20 years ago. As we know, music biopic films have been really consistently present in the last 5 years, ever since Bohemian Rhapsody became such a massive hit, and that trend is continuing into next year when we're going to get Antoine Fuqua's Michael Jackson movie, and I talked about the Amy Winehouse movie earlier this year, which was not successful. That being said, Complete Unknown, I liked a lot. There's a lot to recommend about this movie. Even though I saw this movie earlier, there's not a whole lot to really spoil. It's a music biopic film, it's based on history. Thankfully, this movie is about a specific stretch of Bob Dylan's career and life versus his whole life, given how long his career was. It makes sense that they would kind of focus on a specific time period with the story. And it's largely, also unsurprisingly, Dylan's rise up from unknown musician to folk music superstar, then his transition to going electric, and the tension that was filled with that. A Complete Unknown is really satisfying as a music biopic film, despite the fact that it's very conventional in its storytelling. However, that convention is familiar for a reason. Done as well as it's done by James Mangold and Timothée Chalamet in this movie, you understand why people find that so satisfying. The rise of Dylan during a tumultuous time in history is communicated, I think, in a really effective way. And also his impact on folk music and his transition away from folk is also done quite convincingly. A Complete Unknown's strength is largely rested on the fact that we get to experience some of the most famous and popular Bob Dylan songs performed as set pieces in the movie. And as everyone knows, Bob Dylan, one of the greatest, if not the greatest songwriter of all time. Those are powerful scenes because those are powerful songs. And Chalamet is up to the task in this movie. This is another arrow in his quiver in the amazing last 12 months he has had between this, Dune, and Wonka. Now, I will fully admit I am not a Bob Dylan scholar. There are a lot of people that are. Of course, Bob Dylan has, over 50 albums, such a long, legendary career, and because his writing is so strong, there's a lot of study you can do about his work. So I'm not like the most familiar person with Bob Dylan's work beyond his biggest song. So if you're more knowledgeable than I, by all means, disregard my opinion. But I liked the Chalamet performance. I cannot really speak to its accuracy in terms of what Dylan was like in the early 60s. That being said, they both have similar body types, and I think Chalamet does a pretty good job of handling the Dylan kind of nasally, one of a kind speaking voice as well. I love the way he's introduced in the story too, and his kind of chance meeting with Pete Seeger and a ailing Woody Guthrie kind of gives him a big break in a certain sense. The first, chance he gets to perform in front of some important people, and then next thing you know, he gets a record deal. Again, familiar beats when it comes to music biopic, but I think it works really well because I think Chalamet's up to the task, and the songs are there. I gotta say, I really, really loved Edward Norton as Pete Seeger. It's a different kind of performance from Norton, who I think we all know is a great actor, but like Pete Seeger, obviously a very kind and generous person, someone who uh, worked and performed for causes bigger than himself throughout his whole career. Environmentalist, a progressive thinker, things like that. And I think Norton really communicates that character in the Pete Seeger character quite well. It's a really great contrast in the film once he starts to conflict with where Chalamet wants to take his music. Now, ultimately, I think the tension of A Complete Unknown in terms of, Bob Dylan wanting to go electric and not just play traditional folk music for the entirety of his career, despite that bringing him all his early success and fame. It's a tension that only can be so tenuous because obviously we know he goes electric and we know it's incredibly well received and it leads to his actual most successful part of his career, with like Highway 61 and stuff, right? So if you know anything about the story, like where it's gonna go, and that everything's gonna be okay, and that the kind of moral panic that's presented by certain characters in the movie about, uh, leaving traditional American good, wholesome folk behind for this loud, real rock and roll that the British invasion are, dumping on America, like that is not like real conflict anymore. So it's like hard to be so fully invested in the other side of things. But again, I think because the set pieces in the movie really land and the Dylan songs really work, that when you see, you know, big swings happen in the movie, to me, they're really powerful. I mean, in the middle of the movie, you get Dylan playing "The Times They Are Changin'," obviously one of his most famous songs, and that is a song with real meaning and real message. And I think it's a really powerful scene in the movie, watching the crowd react to that song, which he's playing, new for the first time, which is such a mind blowing thing to wrap your head around. About Bob Dylan, like, here's a new one for you, and then he plays, one of the most celebrated pieces of music writing ever. Um, Seeing that performed live in front of a massive crowd at the Newport Folk Festival, which is a frequent setting throughout the years in this movie, that really works. Also, supporting character Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash, his second appearance in a James Mangold movie after Walk the Line. Boyd is not in this movie enough because he is awesome as Johnny Cash. What a great performance from him. Really loved it. Would have loved more. There's a moment when he's like pretty still kind of drunk, and he's kind of moving a parked car out of the way and just bashing it into other cars. It's really funny. Elle Fanning, I think, has a lot to carry in the movie as Sylvie Russo, who is the girlfriend of Bob Dylan during his early years of his fame and blow up, but obviously does not stick around. And I think that's a tension that's done, I think, decently well in the movie. I don't know if the relationship is ever fully communicated enough to be super invested in it, but I did enjoy Chalamet and Fanning together. However, I think the true revelation of A Complete Unknown is Monica Barbaro as Joan Baez. Joan Baez, of course, another folk singer, early collaborator with Dylan. Dylan and Baez have some personal trysts as well, in addition to some professional work together. She is absolutely magnetic, and she is able to hold the screen next to Chalamet. And that is no small feat. We know how much presence Timothée Chalamet has. He has movie star qualities oozing out of him, right? You think of Dune Part 2 when Paul and Chani are sitting on the sand dunes, and then you watch, Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya's characters fall in love and make out, and it's just pure movie star moment between two movie stars, right? Monica Barbaro singing with Chalamet together as they look into each other's eyes, and the crowd eats it all up. Like, that is some movie magic, and that, I think, anytime they're together on screen, it's the best stuff in the movie. I definitely want to see her in a lot of other stuff. She's done plenty of work, but like, this is her most high profile role to date, and it's a home run in my opinion. I mean, at this point, again, shout out Chalamet, man. I mean, we've been singing the praises. So many people have ever since the real breakthrough with Call Me By Your Name in 2017, right? People know the story at this point, and it's been a steady and consistent rocket ship since then, as people rightfully heralded Timothée Chalamet as the next great American movie star. And that is what's happened, you know? And he has great taste in filmmakers, but now he's also getting hits under his belt. And I think A Complete Unknown has decent box office potential. I don't know how, like, populist seeing a Bob Dylan movie is in the way that we know the Michael Jackson movie next year probably will be really big, assuming it's well regarded. This is another, I think, great choice by Chalamet, because it's a risk to portray someone in a biopic so famous, right? And I mean, at this point, like, again, Dune Part 2, Wonka, and this in a 12-month period is just absolutely tremendous. And in terms of what's next for Timmy, we know he has the Safdie movie coming up, Marty Supreme. And of course, he'll be in the adaptation of Dune Messiah whenever that comes out from Denny in a few years' time, Dune 3. Other than that, there's not a lot on the calendar, so I'm curious what's going to come up from him. He's about to turn 29 later this month. Still got a long career ahead of him, man. It's really exciting. Really fun time to be a fan of his, for sure, right? Shout out the Lookalike Contest as well. And also on the music biopic front, I mentioned the Michael Jackson movie, of course, which I don't even necessarily have high hopes for because it's from Antoine Fuqua, one of the most hit or miss directors in Hollywood. But I am very excited about the Jeremy Allen White Bruce Springsteen movie. That is a very similar type choice the way this Chalamet Dylan movie is, in my opinion. So that's exciting. But yeah, let me know, what did you think of Complete Unknown once you've seen it? What'd you like most about it? Are you team Monica Barbaro moving forward like me? Let me know. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. That's going to do it for the pod this week. Next week, only a few things to get into, but some key highlights, of course. Rosé of Blackpink dropping her debut solo album, Rosie. Very exciting after the big success of her first single, APT, with Bruno Mars. Also, new music from Twice, but confusing that they're releasing that head-to-head with the Rosé album. Nonetheless, gotta get to it. And then also, I'm going to see the Daniel Craig, Luca Guadagnino movie Queer, Luca's second movie of the year, actually, after Challengers. And I'm also going to catch up on the new Paramount Plus series, The Agency, which I'm very excited to get into. So make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, linktree.com/nostalgiapod. See links below. Get the best of 2024 Spotify playlist linked below. And I'll see you next week.